Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Shawne Merriman, round number 2. Thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Dude, I'm super excited for this. So we're going to talk a little bit about two things. We're going to talk first about the latest, your fight on Saturday night with Lights Out Xtreme Fighting League, right? And then we're going to talk about this new network that's coming up in about 3 weeks or so, you said. And I'm super excited to have you, man. Thanks for being here again.
No, I appreciate it, man. I always enjoy coming on. I was wondering when I was coming back. So, it's a good time. And as you said before, we had a big fight Saturday in Long Beach for Lights Out Xtreme Fighting, and just buzzing off of that, man. It was our biggest turnout we've had in the history of the company. So, things are great.
So talk to us a little bit about the fight and a little bit about how things are progressing, because I know how long ago did you start Lights Out Xtreme Fighting League?
It was at the end of 2019, but we got hit with the pandemic like everyone else, and so we had to restart. Right, we're down for about a year and a half or two, and got back going again. So I always say it's a 2.5-year-old company, because anything before the pandemic, everything just switched and everything changed. So, but to have this growth to where we are right now in 2.5 years is unprecedented, and it hasn't happened before.
Well, you're delivering a product that people really like. I mean, people are into this stuff, right? Now, let's talk a little bit about, we talked on the last episode, right? We got your life story and we talked about Lights Out Xtreme Fighting. But one of the things that we talked about that was just been unveiled were these chips that are in the gloves. So give us kind of the latest on that, because you were still, when we talked last time, you were still accumulating data and everybody was super impressed with all the data you were collecting.
Yeah. It's we partnered with a company called Shot Tracker. So Shot Tracker has that chip in the NBA basketball and league and PGA, and I think MLB and so forth. And they just finished up March Madness as well. They had a big run with Shot Tracker and March Madness. So that's been great. But I've always looked at kind of this sport different, right? It has so many other verticals, so many opportunities for people to consume the content, how they consume it, and just make it fun, man. And I think that being able to partner with Shot Tracker and have those chips in the gloves, like we talked about last time, and now receiving the data, right? It comes back and it just looks like a whole bunch of squiggly lines and what this do and what that does. And so they just are finishing up now the algorithm. So the next fight we have, May 18th, some of the data will be alive and instant. So that is what we're trying to get. And this data will be able to pull speed, power, punch, velocity, G-force. These things will be instant, where the fans are watching our fights and can see how fast that punch came, right? Or the G-force of which it landed, how it landed, where it landed at, where the guy was in the cage, was his back up against the cage.
Right.
So we're getting very very, very in tune with, just giving fans more data. And we know that, because this hasn't been done at this capacity before, that we're just giving our viewers just more to look at and something very interesting to do.
Well, I think this is cool because, everybody wants to be interactive, right? And this literally puts them in the ring. You with me? So they get, I mean, you mentioned before that they get G-force, they get and one of the things you mentioned also the last time was that you get to judge basically whether a fighter has a chin or not. Talk a little bit about because it's it comes down to whether they can take a punch, right?
Yeah.
So
no
one
doubt.
guy might get hit with 8 Gs and he melts, right? Like his legs give out. Another guy gets hit with it and he just kind of brushed it off. So talk about that for a second.
Yeah, that to me, we talk. I think the biggest word you just said is interactive. Everybody wants to be as interactive as possible because we know that interaction creates viewership, interaction creates interest, and it keeps people there. That's what you want. You want people not scrolling through whatever streaming service or platform you're on to just go to the next one because it just looks the same. Now, if you can find out, like you just said, a guy can take a heavier punch, right, than the guy after. So you start to judge, guys' toughness, guys, ability to sustain big blows and things like that. How fast that punch came, and what's the output? Was a guy throwing more punches the first round than he is the second, than he is the third, right? Is this output is going down because he's tired? Now there's so many I guess verticals to look at when you're talking about building data and just how people are receiving it.
Well, here's what I think is super cool. Okay. Now, we've always done fighting, and I'm talking about, boxing, right? But we've done boxing based on weight, right? If you were a heavyweight, if you're a welterweight, if you're a middleweight, right? All that kind of stuff, right? And lightweight, right? And some of the strongest people on the planet are smaller dudes. They just have more density. They have more ability to just flat out bring it, right? That's what I think is interesting, because people are going to look at these fighters, and they're going to think, oh, this guy could take the world hitting him in the chin, right? And somebody's going to hit him, and they're going to see the G-force, and that guy is going to just wither, right? Like he's just going to be, right? And all of a sudden, they're going to figure out who the toughest guy on the planet is in regard to this. You with me? And so it's a filtering process to an extent. But here's the thing: everybody has today, I call it the Amazon syndrome, right? Everybody today has such a short attention span. Okay, if you don't grab them, and you're going to grab them with data, you're going to grab them with this interactivity. Okay, if you don't grab them the way you're grabbing them, let's be honest, they're going to change the channel. They're going to go somewhere else, right? And if you can also sprinkle in the fact that this guy that's this big around, right, is tougher, stronger, can punch harder, take more, you with me? It's like all of a sudden you're defying what people see. The data, you can't argue with the data, right? You can argue all day long that Mike Tyson could take a punch better than so-and-so. You with me?
Yep.
But if you can document it, that's where the rubber meets the road. And you don't have to be a scientist to appreciate how this works. Some of the toughest guys on the planet don't have a ton of muscle on them. Okay. Look at some of these Navy SEALs, right?
Yep.
We had a former Navy SEAL on the other day. Yeah, he's well built and he's physical and all that kind of stuff, right? But he's one of the toughest guys you've ever met in your life. And to be honest with you, he didn't seem to me to be all that stacked. You know what I mean?
No.
Like you're way more yoked than he ever dreamed of being. Does that make sense? So
no, and just to that, I got this running joke, right? Especially when you talk about MMA fighters now. Back in the day, you got a guys down there having a bar fight or whatever. You look at a smaller guy, and you're like, oh, that guy can't fight, but you don't know that guy packs a punch like a heavyweight, and
they're scrappy, dude. They're
100%.
And when you're talking about extreme fighting, you're talking about grappling, you're talking about jiu-jitsu, you're talking about judo, you're talking about all these different moves. I mean, some of these guys are like snakes, man. They can flat out get a hold of you with their legs, get a hold of you with their arms and grapple you, right? And put you in a hold, and you're done.
Yep.
You're done. Okay. And I know, to me, I just think that's the coolest thing, because it's not about what size you are. It's about how flippin' tough you can be, right? And how almost stealthy you can be in terms of what you can grab and how you can. And does that make sense? So it's not the biggest, it's not the biggest guy walking around with all these muscles and that kind of thing necessarily. It could be the guy that you overlook. And that's where I think the magic is in what you're doing with this live feedback. Okay. Because people are going to have a chance to juxtapose what this guy looks like versus this guy in terms of the data. Does that make sense?
100%. And so that's one thing we're trying to create, right? We want that. We want to, when you start talking about data and getting accurate data. So, right,
Yeah.
we knew that the data wasn't going to be as accurate the first time we did it out. We already planned that.
Oh, sure.
We wanted to see what we can pull from there,
Yeah.
right? We wanted to see what kind of data collect, what does it look like? Were there any blank spots? Did the signal work? Was it the motion cameras that was up top? Did it sync right? I mean, so it was really dialed in. And now that we know what we have,
Right.
it's endless. I mean, you think of these betting companies out there. I mean, that these, when I brought it up to some of the biggest betting companies in the world, they instantly said, Shawne, this is right up our alley. This is what we need, because this is more information to the consumer to give them to see ultimately what the goal is, right? And what's happening inside that cage. And if you can bet that the guy is going to get knocked out with over 20 G-force or 30 G-force and happens, that's another area for betting. And that's such a big part of live sports. And so healthcare, right? A guy, hey, if you don't get hit over 30 or 40 G-force, will we come in and insure this guy? Right? As he haven't had a lot of damage, right? We could collect this data for healthcare companies. And, these are the verticals that I'm talking about that's always been more important to me, because fighting has been around for thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
And it's the oldest sport we have. It'll always be around. And now that the UFC are leaders in this space, and they've kind of paved the road for many, it's a global phenomenon. It's everywhere. People are watching fighting everywhere in the world. And coming from somebody who played in the NFL, right, that knowing that the NFL will always be king here in the States, when you're talking about fighting, it's international, it's global, it's in all countries.
Yeah.
And so when you have that outreach and you have that ability to grow in that capacity, it changes the game with everything. So yeah, this is really going to change the way people consume combat sports content.
Yeah, I agree with that. And let me just give you a little sprinkling here, okay? So one of the coolest things, and I'm not joking when I say this, one of the coolest things about the NFL, okay, is people like Austin Eckler. Undrafted free agent, earned every single thing that he got, wouldn't give up, all determination, didn't come from, this flashy D1 school. You with me?
Yep.
Like, those types of stories make the NFL. That's exactly what you're doing with Lights Out. And with the data that you're able to put there, it helps with the story. You with me? Stories sell, dude. And people who won't take no for an answer, like, it doesn't matter how much you knock them down. It doesn't, I mean, this is your story encapsulated in this thing, right? Because it didn't matter what happened to you growing up. It didn't matter where you were. None of that stuff mattered. You kept your eye on the ball and you stayed determined. What you're doing right now is you're providing a snapshot for people, right? A camera look into these people's lives. We don't know where they came from. We don't know, you know what I mean? Like, their story is a big deal, but when they come from nowhere and all of a sudden, all of a sudden they're one of the best in the industry, right? That's a story, man. That's the kind of stuff that really gets people fired up, because everybody loves an underdog, dude.
No, for sure. And look, and you're right, man. People gravitate to stories because it's relatable, right?
Yeah.
You want to hear about these guys because there's somebody out there watching that happened to too.
That's
And
it.
so
They connect. They connect with it.
It's a connection. And trust me, that's why the NFL is so big, right? NFL films and all this, the 30 for 30s and all, like, just all the stories of the buildup, how somebody got there, right? Do we got fighters that slept in the gym, right? Those working in the gym as a custodian in order to get part-time work so they can have free training staff. I mean, just there's a long list of things, and I've always been very, very understanding that that's what the audience want, and so we try to provide more of that for them.
Well, that's what you're doing. And you know, one of my favorite stories about the NFL is James Harrison. I absolutely love this guy. Okay. And part of the reason I love him because I didn't really necessarily pay attention to him until he went to the Bengals. Okay. And then the Bengals had this thing called Hard Knocks.
Yep.
Right. And all of a sudden the team starts talking about the fact that they showed up at the facility at 4:30 in the morning. Harrison had been in the gym for an hour already. You
Yep.
with me? That's the kind of stuff people absolutely dig. They dig the fact that somebody like him that had been in the league as long as he'd been in. The guy's a veteran, man. I mean, to say he's a journeyman is an understatement, right? And here he is outworking the young guys. He's outworking everybody, right? It's his work ethic. That's what you're highlighting with what you're doing, in that you're bringing people from all walks of life into this fighting league, and you're measuring them in ways that will completely shock the system, because people will look at these people and no way, there's no way he punched harder than that guy that's got him by 100 pounds. Well, you know what? He just did. He just
No question.
did.
No question. And when you start making those correlations, it's everything, man. And
Yeah.
you know, the growth that we're seeing now at this point, I think, as you said, one of the biggest parts is just resonating with people.
Yeah.
And so the more and more distribution we end up having, the more and more fights we put on, the more and more we get out about these fighters. We had a guy just, real quick, our co-main event, Lazaro Valdez. He's we call him the Cuban Hunter is his nickname. This guy who came from Cuba, is fighting for his family to stay here, and his reasons for, he had an awesome post-fight interview too. It was great. He took the mic from our commentator Pablo, which is great, and started to go off because he was speaking Spanish to him at first, but he started to speak English, and it was really, really cool. Yeah, so like those stories is why more and more people are watching this.
Yeah. And it draws them in. You know what I mean? It draws them in because people want to see these types of situations where people come from like the toughest situations like you did, and they will themselves to be successful. You with me? Because the fact of the matter is, he could have quit anytime. You could have quit anytime. Okay. Austin Eckler could have quit anytime, but they didn't.
Yep.
Right. That's where I feel like the real juice is here. And then you add to it that feedback, that data feedback that you're getting. And then you start juxtaposing what this guy that looks like he can't do this does versus what this guy looks like he should have done. Right. That's magic. I think that's absolute magic. I think it's your secret sauce. I really do. Okay. So hats off to you for Saturday night. It sounds like Saturday night was a real success, and we're getting ready to launch a network. Oh my goodness gracious, right? This is really cool. So talk to us a little bit about sort of, and I know we talked a little bit about this the last time we were together, but let's rewind it for people. What was sort of talk about how the Xtreme Fighting League started, because I know it was a conversation with Jay Glazer, and by the way, I want to get Jay on the program. I want to get, if you can connect me, that'd be huge.
Yeah.
But I'd love to interview Jay. But I know you were at Jay Glazer's gym, and you were working out in the off season, right? And he was blown away at how good you were at boxing, like just fighting, period. And that sort of started, if you will, the embryo of this that became the fighting league. Talk to us about how the network is being born. Like what happened that made you decide to do this?
Yeah, for one, you're right. Jay was instrumental, man, in introducing me to MMA, even though I had a boxing background. My uncles were professional boxers and whatnot. But
yeah, it's in your family.
Yeah, it was. We grew up. It was in our family, and I spent a lot of my time around boxing growing up. And then kind of fast forward to getting MMA, and obviously having the opportunity to train with some of the biggest in the world, especially that mid 2000s, right? When MMA was pumping, it was so hot. It just got on the scene. You had the Chuck Liddells who I trained with, and Tito Ortiz and Randy Couture's, Tyron Woodley when he first started, kind of coming in the mix there in the mid to late 2000s. And so, I had the opportunity just to be around a sport. That's what I spent most of my time with. After I got done with my football workouts in the off season, I was around these guys training. So, that kind of led me into the MMA space. That's how I launched Lights Out Extreme Fighting. But I think more importantly, I mean, I've been very fortunate, and I kind of want to dive into this because it's never really been told this way. Outside of playing on the biggest platform in the country, which is NFL, and one of the biggest global sports in the world, and then they're kind of rolling out these countries. I retired and got straight into TV. I went to NFL Network and for a couple of years, and ESPN a couple of years, Fox Sports a couple of years, and kind of rotated around all three networks. And so understanding TV and production is where I got my background at in the first place. That's why, when people when they watch our fights, I was out just about a week and a half ago, and I was doing some promotion for the fight. And the first thing that, the guy, I think it was a Tampa Bay ESPN, he said, "Shawne, we just had on your fights." I just want to say that the production is top notch. And for me, kind of coming from that field, I like to hear that first. And then the fights being great second. When somebody notices the production quality, I'm like, okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so,
It's a big deal too.
It's a huge deal. You want to offer the best production quality to everybody's watching. But being able to work at these big networks, man, I understood how all of them work and operated, not just as a talent, but also behind the scenes, and kind of spending a lot of time. And so, we're a few weeks away from launching Lights Out Sports. It's a free ad-supported multi-sports platform. I realized that I got the opportunity even to do stuff like this, right? Being on your platforms and promoting certain things, and a lot of other platforms, which, you gotta, you're bringing on entertaining guests, right? People that your fans and your listeners want to hear from. And so I get that opportunity to talk about what I have going on. So it opened the floodgates on promotion. It opened the floodgates on my, knowledge. I work with the WWE. Monday Night Raws, Thursday Night SmackDowns. I've done pay-per-views. I got extensive background in all these other platforms, networks. And so my information and background, my expertise comes from that, being able to do that.
Yeah.
And so launching my Lights Out Sports multi-sports platform only made sense because now, we'll have World Series of Poker, right? Well, I'm sorry, World Poker Tour on there as well. We'll have Glory Kickboxing. We'll have Swerve, all the Combat Sports Channel, iHeart, all your number one leaders in outdoor sports and racing and motorsports. They're all coming on board. And what I've seen over my decade plus in being in TV is that once you're able to resonate, and we just talk about resignation, how important that is. I was in NASCAR. I owned a NASCAR team in the Can-Am Series, Jesse Awuji's team, who was one of two black drivers in NASCAR, and I helped him get all the way up to the Infinity Series. So, being able, I've been to every short and long track in this country. And so, having this background and knowledge of what I do is why I'm doing what I'm doing, to create a all sports, just sports platform where, look, I think Pluto's great. I watch Pluto a couple nights a week. Hulu, I watch Amazon Freevee and these other really, really good platforms, but I don't watch them for sports.
Right.
I'll go there and they got, crime shows and sitcoms and movies and, just so they got so much of that other offering. I felt that some of these niche sports was getting, neglected, right? And not by Pluto, but by the customer, because you got to go through 300 plus channels to find them.
Well, let's be honest, there's a lot to choose from, right? And that's part of their model. The Amazon model is we got more than you can possibly consume.
Right.
And you're right. What happens is the sports part of it sort of gets pushed to the side. Okay. And I get that, NFL Prime and all that kind of stuff. I get all that. Okay. But when you start talking about sports like you're talking about,
right,
that starts getting pushed over to the periphery. And I would argue even more now than before. And so, and with, one of the things that we've never talked about, and I think it's important that we talk about, is even when you were a kid, you were constantly soaking up information. Like you're constantly paying attention. You're constantly learning, right? You're like a sponge. And you're that way today, I think, as much as you were as a kid. that experience that you've had with ESPN, with Fox Sports, with right, that's all invaluable, man. That's incredibly important. And by the way, it's one of the reasons why your production level is so excellent. Okay. Your production level is so excellent because of what you've experienced. You've seen how these world-class networks work and what they've had to do to produce the right kind of world-class production. You've always had high standards anyway, but now you know how to deliver those high standards, right? And
Right.
it's all because of your background. It's because of what you've been through and what you've experienced. But I think more than anything else, how much you've listened, how much you've asked questions, how curious you've stayed. You know what I mean? Like that's a real credit to you. That's a real credit to you as a person, right? But more importantly, as an owner of a network, right? An owner of a fighting league. That's a big deal, man. It's a
No,
big, big
no,
deal.
I appreciate that, man. And two, like I go back to about being fortunate, right? Because when you talk about these big networks, to hold a chair, what I call a chair, you got a panel of 4 people, right?
Yeah.
That's why I held a chair on, all the biggest networks, ESPN and Fox Sports, NFL Network. I had a chair, and so to have that opportunity to see how things work behind the scenes is invaluable. It's like getting your master's in,
Yeah.
production. It's getting your master's in TV, is getting your master's in how ads work and marketing. I mean, I read off some of the reads right before we went to commercial breaks and ad breaks. So I get it. I understand what that means to a network to have this back end. And so, so when we launched Lights Out Sports is to be a free ad supported platform. We want everybody to be able to be on all CTV platforms, all major platforms you can think of to get out there. So it'll be available everywhere, and we'll roll out here, starting with the U.S. first. But we're talking about a couple months before we start to roll out other countries. And it's great working with Otera is a partner of mine in building the app and platform. And so we got a lot of things to do. But the biggest thing for me was having distribution all over the world. All
Yeah.
right. One, being able to control your content, control how you want to view your platform and how you want people to view your platform and how the consumers view it. Two was we want everybody in the world to be able to either download it or look up on some TV platform or whatever, and it's there. And that's the next steps for us. The Fight Zen for Lights Out Extreme Fighting will become live
Yeah.
on the platform, and we got some other great partners and platforms we're working with, so you can re-air it, and people getting more and more viewership. But for now, it'll be live on Lights Out Sports.
And there's going to be an app, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it'll be available in the App Store and Android and all that, right?
Andrew, and yes,
And it's going
all
to be
major
Lights
platforms.
Out Sports Network.
Yeah, Lights Out. Yeah, Lights Out Sports.
Okay, Lights Out Sports. Okay, and it'll be about 3 weeks, you think?
Yep.
Okay, so we're currently talking. We're currently taping on April 8th, Monday, April 8th, and the men's basketball national championship, NCAA is tonight, right? The women just played yesterday, and South Carolina won, right? So that app will be ready in about 3 weeks. So probably right towards the end of April,
Correct.
beginning of May. So people need to be watching out for it. So what you're doing is you're going to have this available. The network's going to be available on the App Store in about 3 weeks, like the beginning of May.
Yep.
You're going to have it available for Android. So it's going to be available out there. And then it's also going to be a smart TV app on like all the smart TVs like LG and Vizio and all that. So people are going to be able to access this anywhere where there's internet access. And like we talked about, there's some 2 billion people in the next few years and the last few years that are gaining internet access. This is the perfect time for you to launch this thing worldwide.
No, absolutely. It couldn't have been a better time, especially right now with where streaming is going, where fast is
Yeah.
going. There's so many different places to consume content right now at this point. And to kind of be the sports aggregator, the number one, and that's what we want to be. We want to be the number one sports aggregator for sports content. I guess you can call it secondary content, but to me, secondary content, implies sometimes that people don't watch it, and people definitely watch it. I mean, we have, chess.com that's coming on. Chess is huge internationally.
Yeah.
All over the world, people are having chess tournaments.
Yeah.
World Poker Tour, they're coming
Right.
up. Huge. Having
And
live
extreme
events.
fighting, lights out extreme fighting.
Lights Out Extreme Fighting to be live. iHeart has a channel as well. Glory Kickboxing has a channel. Other combat sports, Swerve Combat, and your number one fishing, outdoor hunting sports will have a channel. Your billiards, cornhole, darts, you name it. We want to be number one in those spaces, and we really feel like we could. And so we want to make sure we have a wide range and variety of sports that everyone wants to come and see.
This is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
100%. Yeah, we have live sports. We have live sports in there as well, and also we have a library of VOD content as well. So people, when the live sports aren't happening, if they miss some of their events, they miss some of the the live channels that they have, it'll be on the VOD and library content, so people can still watch.
Right.
That's what we're trying to create.
So VOD, for people that don't know, is video on demand.
Yes.
Right. So VOD is sort of an industry abbreviation, right? But literally what it means is if you're listening to this and watching it, you can literally go and click on a particular race, right? So say it's a motorcycle race or whatever. You can click on a particular race or a fight or whatever if you missed it live, and you can literally watch it instantly on video on demand. So that's an even cooler thing for a lot of people that are concerned about missing something, right? That then they can go back and watch. So that's something people don't have to worry about that basically they're covered.
100%. And that's what we wanted to create. We wanted to make sure that we have enough offering. Obviously the live sports aspect is going to be huge for us because people come for live, right? You can always watch VOD and library content, but most people come and they want to see live content, which we'll have a lot of from a lot of these partners we're working with. And so and we're just getting started. I mean, this is just getting off of the ground. This is what we're starting, a massive amount of eyeballs and behind the scenes things going on. But this will also be something that be very global. It's going to be very global where people can watch it all over the world. And that aspect of it, we didn't have before, right? With Lights Out Extreme Fighting, football is great, but they're kind of big in the States and I believe Canada. That's it. Yeah. And so now that someone in Brazil, someone in Asia, in Africa, wherever you are, I mean, we're going to make this available as many places as we possibly can.
That's awesome, man. So anybody who's looking for sports, looking for action, looking for extreme fighting, looking for you mentioned chess, you mentioned the poker tour, right?
Poker tour, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you're talking. People are going to be able to access anything that they want that's sports related 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if they don't get it, it'll be live. But if they don't get it live, they can go to video on demand. So, I mean, you've got it covered every which way. So we're launching this, you think, in about 3 weeks. So about beginning of May, it sounds like.
Correct. Yeah, I would say towards the end of April, very latest, beginning of May. There's been 6 months in the works of progress. And so there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes. Obviously having the right partners is key because, one thing we know that when this traffic does come in and people do, discover the app and see what we're building, we want to make sure that we're working with the best.
Right.
And we feel that we are.
Yeah. So I think between you being the gatepost, and I apologize for taking the liberty of saying this, but I think this is something you've been preparing for your entire life.
It feels like it, man.
I really do, man. Of course, I know your life story, right?
Yeah, but seriously, I mean that's a very that's a very true statement, right? Yeah. Because you look at the life story, look at everything I've been through. I just talked about how fortunate I was to be at the major networks, to work with WWE. And so my background in this space and tech, the relationships I have in the tech space, it's happening now, right? You kind of, you ever, kind of hear a quote where people say it takes you 10 years to be an overnight success. It feels that way. It feels like I've been at this thing for 10 years. And now everything's happening now is because of what I've done over the past 10 years. And being in the position that I am, I take that, the responsibility of all this knowledge, all this information I've accumulated over the last 10, 15 years in this space to being able to apply it to things that I believe is going to be the future.
Yeah. And that's cool, man. I mean, like we talked about before, I think the coolest thing about you in particular is you're just always learning. You're constantly asking, you're constantly seeking out, you know what I mean? Like you're constantly, like the NASCAR thing, right? Owning a NASCAR team taught you a ton, right? And you learned a ton from Fox Sports. You learned a ton from ESPN. I mean, everywhere you go, you're just like you're learning, right? And you're adding to, and I feel like this is something you've been working on for a very, very long time, and you've just been kind of depositing it in the recesses of your mind and going, okay, when we have a sports network, when we have an Extreme Fighting League, we're using this. When we have a sports network, we're using this. I can't wait to see what you do next.
Me too, but it's like I'm fighting to get out of the day and fighting to get out the week. It's pretty. Don't get me wrong. I love every second of it. I'm a problem solver by nature. I actually do just like to figure things out. And when I do, I start looking at the next thing I can fix or figure out. And that's my mind constantly works that way. But it does stay in the back of my mind that the knowledge and information we talked about that I picked up over the last 10 years, what I'll learn in the next 12 to 24 months. And I do constantly think like that. What else can I learn to make this thing bigger in the next 12 or 24 months? And I think that there's a misperception out there about when you own a company and you kind of walk around with your chest poked out and this is mine and this is the way it goes. And for me, it's a constant learning phase of learning more about tech, learning more about ad sales. I mean, right now that's the hottest thing that I'm in right now. I got a big pamphlet and I get all this material every day from everybody that kind of works for me in that way. And I ask them, I say, hey, on this ad, how does this ad insertion work? What is this ad break goals? At what point do you reach out and start building out your own ad server? And what are SSPs, SSAIs? There's a constant learning every single day that I almost feel like if I'm not learning, then I haven't moved forward. I just haven't moved forward if I didn't learn anything that day. So right now I'm really into just ads and how ads work and, both the buy and sell side and how things go that way. So that right now is probably the most intriguing to me.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, I am so incredibly honored that you came on for a second time to spend some time with us and to explain to us what it is you're working on. I can't wait to see the next deal that you're working on. I'm super excited and I know I'm going to be impressed. I'm thoroughly impressed with you and I'm extremely proud of you. You really go at this the way that it should be done. There is no ego here, okay? There's, with everything you've accomplished in your life, you could have a really, really large head and not give anybody the time of day. And that's just not the way you're built. And I love that about you. And I'm super proud of you. I'm super excited to see this sports network kick off. I can't wait to download the app. So you're always welcome to come back, as you know, right? Anything else you're working on, or if you want to come back once you've started the sports network, you're always more than welcome to come back. I cannot thank you enough for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience again.
Thanks a lot, man. Always great coming on, and I can't wait to come back. I appreciate it.
You're the man, dude. I appreciate you. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out Calendly.com/Rio760.